It's January 2004, and residents at an apartment building at Queen's Park in Sydney's eastern suburbs are complaining about a very bad smell coming from a ground floor storeroom. By January the 10th, the foul smell has become too much for residents to bear. A maintenance man is summoned to investigate the problem. As he nears the open storeroom, he realizes something is terribly wrong. The stench coming from inside the room is overpowering. An old mattress has been placed across the unlocked doorway. He pushes it aside. The room is filled with piled up junk, discarded boxes and furniture. As he moves further into the room, covering his face as he does so, he is almost knocked backwards by an overpowering stench. At first, he believes an animal has crawled into the room and died. In a corner, he sees what looks like a large bag partially hidden beneath some furniture. It's heavy, but he manages to pull the bag free, dragging it backwards towards the light of the open door. He uses a knife to cut through the fabric. To his horror, a human hand falls out through the cut onto the concrete floor. He reels back in fright, and breathlessly, he staggers away to call police. It's the 13th of April 2001, and finally the big day has arrived. 16-year-old Lyndsay Van Blanken is very excited. After months of planning, Lindsay's mother Cynthia is marrying her new fiancé David Pleasance, and Lindsay can't wait. It's a lavish affair attended by close family and friends. Lindsay and her best friend from school, Jocelyn Tajadi, are socialising with the wedding guests. A string quartet is softly playing as the newlyweds enjoy the festivities. 18-year-old Will Matheson is a member of the quartet, but he's having trouble concentrating on his cumbersome cello, distracted by the two teenagers, Lindsay and her friend Jocelyn. When the musicians take a break, Will makes a beeline for the girls. Lindsay is shy, and Jocelyn makes the introductions. Lindsay's big sister Louise is watching the exchange between the girls and Will Matheson from across the garden.
And Jocelyn had just given him their phone numbers and contact details, so they were running down giggling at the time. And as I said, that wasn't something that Lindsay would do, but Jocelyn actually coaxed her into that because she was still at that age, quite a shy girl.
Will actually he liked me, and then he started going around to Lindsay's house and bothering her, and I guess they started hanging out, but nobody really knew about it.
So what's your band's name?
Lindsay is quite taken by the young musician, and in the days and weeks that follow, she and Will strike up a growing friendship. Will lives with his parents at Coogee, not far from Lindsay's home at Queen's Park in Sydney's eastern suburbs.
Yeah, it's my very good friend who played a couple of years.
We sort of became aware that he was around and he'd ring her up occasionally.
I like drawing too.
But it was probably about 6 months, I'd have it a guess, I mean, roughly. It was quite a while after the wedding that we sort of understood that...
It was a friendship. That's what
she said,
yeah.
She said it was a friendship.
As time passes, Will and Lindsay's friendship develops, although at first Will is hesitant about entering into a serious relationship with Lindsay. Being around Will Matheson changes Lindsay dramatically. She begins to dress like him, wearing old clothes. Her hair is pushed over her face, and she wears a beanie, just like Will does. She disappears from home for long periods at night, spending time with Will wandering through local parks and hanging out with him at a nearby cemetery.
Oh, it'd be just nice to get them off my back for a bit.
What do you want to do?
I don't know.
He took control of her life, I think, and a lot of it was through manipulation. I don't know what other methods he used, but, you know, he did, and she started to dress like him, started to speak like him, and, you know, recalling the girl I was describing earlier, this was just an enormous turnaround.
Why? What do you want to do?
I think you know.
She wasn't sneaky. She'd just say, I'm going. And I'd say, well, why do you want to go? She said, oh, it's so peaceful out there in the night time with the moon. And she started to speak the way he did, and it was quite scary. I really felt like I'd lost control of her. And,
We had.
Well, we had, yeah. That's not a good feeling.
Will is obsessed by horror rap music, featuring bizarre lyrics about strangling and mutilating people. His favourite comic character is a sinister homicidal maniac. He has a collection of pet rats and ferrets living in his bedroom. Lindsay is fascinated by this strange, almost bohemian lifestyle. However, Lindsay's mother Cynthia and stepfather David aren't quite sure what to make of Will Matheson. None of this bothers Lindsay. As far as she's concerned, her relationship with Will is fine. At the same time, she's concentrating on her talent for drawing. Lindsay also shares this passion with friends she makes on the internet. In fact, the internet opens a whole new world for Lindsay, and there are numerous websites on which she's able to express her love of drawing with others who are just like her. The web can be a strange, dark and dangerous place for the uninitiated, but Lindsay seems to have found a home here and quickly immerses herself in its culture. Her internet friends know her as Demon Nurse. It's a name she's given herself, and she corresponds with others around the world, calling themselves Turnip Juice, Apple Sauce, and Noodle, just to name a few. It's fun, and this is just the place a shy teenage girl like Lindsay can share her love of animation. Lindsay spends hours working on the animated characters she's created, many of which she copies into her prized art diary.
She was very good. She actually was designing her own caricatures as well, which weren't actually cartoons. They were more like characters within games.
The diary also contains a record of her innermost thoughts and feelings. It's while sharing her other passion for video games on the internet in 2002 that Lindsay begins to form a friendship with a young American. He is Brandon Leonard, a 20-year-old hairdresser who lives half a world away in Seattle on the west coast of the United States. They talk to each other every day, exchanging emails and web posts, and soon become firm friends.
I met Lindsay through a computer video game. I just randomly went on one day and found a name of a player that sounded interesting and decided I'd try against that person, and we got along really well.
Lindsay is still in a relationship with Will, but she's quite taken by Brandon, and their friendship grows, albeit after a somewhat comical beginning.
Brandon thought Lindsay was a boy because Lindsay was very a tomboy, you know, like you suck at this game or whatever. So he didn't even know she was a girl till they started using the webcam and he saw that Lindsay was not a boy.
She supported me through some of the hardest times of my life, and one day I just realized how much I really cared for her and how much better my life had become since she had entered it, and how I didn't want that to stop.
As the long-distance romance with Brandon flourishes, Lindsay begins to distance herself from Will Matheson.
It was finished, but Lindsay just didn't know how to finish it, being so young.
Lindsay's mother notices a dramatic change in her daughter. Within weeks of starting her friendship with Brandon, she begins to revert to her old self. At around the same time, Lindsay is granted an interview for a job at Walt Disney Animations, who've recently set up an office in Sydney. The prospect of working for Disney is very exciting. Lindsay's whole life seems to be coming together. She's deeply in love with Brandon Leonard, and the prospect of landing her dream job as an animator is now closer than ever. But there is just one problem. Lindsay hasn't told Will Matheson about Brandon Leonard, and what happens next will set in motion a series of events that will end in tragedy. Lyndsay Van Blanken has everything to live for. The shy, pretty teenager has a new romance with a young American man she's met over the internet, and she's secured an interview with Disney Animation as a trainee artist, her dream job. Shortly before her interview with Disney, Lyndsay Van Blanken tells her American boyfriend, Brandon Leonard, how nervous she is. There are 300 applicants for the position. But her apprehension is short-lived when she's told she has the job. At the same time, Simon Ashton worked as a senior animator with Disney.
You have to have a fairly strong artistic skills and quite a high degree of talent to get in at the bottom level of Disney before you start working your way up through the different departments. So a lot of the trainees there that were working there were highly talented artists.
In the United States, Brandon Leonard is just as excited. Shortly before she's due to start work at Disney, Brandon drops a bombshell.
There's a lot of different factors to finding your mate. And when I found Lindsay, and I realized just how much I cared about her, I knew from that moment, even without having to be there physically, I knew that it was perfect.
He proposes to Lindsay over the internet. Lindsay accepts, and the next thing her mother and stepfather know is that Brandon is on his way.
I've got this friend coming from America. Would it be all right if he stayed here? And then I said, well, how far away is he? You know, when's he coming? And she said, he's on the plane. So I said, well, I guess I don't have a lot of say in it, do I?
Lindsay is very excited, but now she has to do something about ending her relationship with Will Matheson. And of more concern, Matheson is becoming increasingly possessive. and she's worried about how he'll react to the news. Lindsay leaves it to the last minute, and just 2 days before Brandon's due to arrive from the United States, she finally tells Will that she doesn't want to see him anymore.
Like, we've been together for too long now, and
Too long? 3 years isn't that long.
I'm sorry.
Why?
Why? I don't love you anymore.
What is it?
I don't love you anymore. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Forget about it.
But she doesn't tell him about Brandon Leonard.
I think she felt sorry for him and she felt scared. He was attaching himself to her and always threatening to kill himself if she broke it off.
On September the 9th, 2003, just a few weeks after Lindsay begins her job with Disney, Brandon Leonard arrives from the United States, and Lindsay's waiting for him at Sydney Airport.
She just loved him. Her face, she beamed. She just loved him to death. She was just so happy.
Lindsay is still concerned about her former boyfriend, Will Matheson, and it's not long before her worst fears are realised. Will follows her to work one day and catches Lindsay and Brandon walking hand in hand.
It's well over there.
What, Will, your ex?
Yeah.
Do you want me to do something about it?
No, just ignore him and it'll go.
You sure?
Yeah, it's okay. He's coming.
His attitude towards Lindsay changes dramatically, and soon afterwards, he turns up at her house where he angrily confronts Brandon.
The guy was creepy. I mean, I got bad karma waves from the moment I walked in the door. I was like, something's not right.
What the hell are you doing here?
Mate, she dumped you. It's over. Can you not understand that?
I'm not being
And I'm not a very spiritual person, but you can feel bad energy and you know it's bad energy when you feel it.
Right now, go.
She's my girlfriend.
Lindsay's mother, Cynthia, witnesses the confrontation.
For 3 years.
And he just started to let fly. He just said to Brandon, you realise that Lindsay's going out with me as well as you? And that wasn't true. Lindsay definitely wasn't going out with him at the same time. Lindsay wasn't that type of person.
I know you're her ex.
Will storms away in a rage.
She's my girlfriend.
Not her boyfriend. Now go home.
Piss off.
He later tells friends he's considering suicide following the breakup. He still loves her, but at the same time, he hates her.
Historically, he hadn't been completely interested in Lindsay, and it was very on again, off again. And then as soon as someone else was in the picture, he virtually changed, I believe, his whole demeanour in terms of, she's mine.
He'd be walking down the street on the other side of the road, or coming out of the laneway, or sitting up the road on the bus stop bench. She said, I'm really getting worried about him because he is following me around all the time. I can't get rid of him. I don't know what to do. So I guess that was the point for us when there were certainly alarm bells.
Meantime, Brandon is busy making plans for the couple to travel to the United States for Christmas. Both he and Lindsay are now deeply in love, and Brandon can't wait to introduce his fiancée to his parents in Seattle.
Wait till you get back to Seattle, though.
On Monday, the 24th of November 2003, Lyndsay Van Blanken is back at work at Disney. During the afternoon, Lindsay is seen having a heated argument with a young man on the footpath outside her workplace.
I was just going for my usual stroll around the office block and I saw Lindsay there talking to this young guy. And they appeared to be having a bit of a disagreement, a bit of an argument. You could tell by their body language that it didn't look, they weren't having a great conversation.
Later that day, Lindsay leaves work to go home at the normal time, about 5:30. She catches a train to Bondi Junction. When she arrives, Will Matheson is waiting for her, and they head off together towards Lindsay's home at nearby Queen's Park. According to Matheson, he leaves Lindsay shortly afterwards and continues on home. Lyndsay Van Blanken is never seen alive again. When Lindsay fails to come home that night, Brandon becomes increasingly worried that something may have happened to his fiancée. Her mobile phone is not answering either.
Brandon knocked on the door and he just sounded awful. He had a really very tiny voice and he just said, "Lindsay hasn't come home."
Hi, I'd like to report my fiancée missing.
Several hours pass before police are informed. Detective Joe Dewey takes charge of the investigation.
And I'm really worried about her.
Lindsay was reported missing to Waverley Police by her fiancé, Brandon Leonard, the following day, Tuesday the 25th of November. Almost immediately upon reading the initial police report, alarm bells started to ring. It was something that was certainly way out of character for Lindsay to just disappear for no apparent reason.
Detectives fear the worst and treat Lindsay's disappearance very seriously.
We, from the very beginning of this investigation, treated it as a murder investigation, and that was based on what the family had told us.
Lindsay's mother, Cynthia, has no idea what could have happened to her daughter and makes an emotional televised appeal for information about Lindsay.
Lindsay, if you're watching this, then please, we love you and miss you and we're worried about you. Please come home.
Lindsay's sister Louise calls Will Matheson to ask him if he knows anything. He tells her he'd met Lindsay the night before when she got off the train at Bondi Junction and that they walked together towards Lindsay's home.
He was quite calm and he just had said that he hadn't seen her since the night before, that he just bumped into her on the way home from work and he left her in an alleyway behind the Charing Cross, which was a pub, which obviously Lindsay didn't frequent, but she walked past there to go home from the station. And I just thought that that was quite strange that Lindsay would go behind a pub into an alleyway anyway, which wasn't really her way home.
Suddenly, Will's father interrupts the call and makes a bizarre comment.
His comment was, "Well, I didn't see any blood on his hands."
Louise informs police about the conversation she has with Will and his father, and detectives decide to pay Will Matheson a visit.
Will was quite upfront. He was happy to assist investigators. He consented to returning to the police station and taking part in an interview.
How long were you involved in a relationship with her? I wouldn't call it so much as a romance, but we were together. She didn't want me getting close to her and Brandon because I think there was some resentment from Brandon. I walked with her for about, 15 minutes, 10 minutes. I've met her in the Bondi Junction area.
Following the interview, Matheson is asked to provide a DNA swab and is fingerprinted and photographed. Detective Tony Williams takes photos of scratches and grazes on Matheson's chest, hands and arms.
He stated that these injuries were from his pet cat and rat and that the graze had come from a skateboarding injury.
From the start, police are suspicious about Will Matheson's version of events.
In the interview, he readily told us that he was aware that Lindsay had gone missing and he attempted to try to find Lindsay by ringing all her family and friends. However, what he did miss was that he never told us he actually tried to ring Lindsay herself. So that raised some suspicion.
Police search local parks and surrounding streets near her home for clues to Lindsay's disappearance. Divers are called in to search lakes in nearby Centennial Park. Police question Lindsay's family and friends.
I would actually have been kind of insulted if they hadn't looked at me as a suspect. Just being who I am, the way that I look, the attitude that I have, the things that come out of my mouth, my nationality even, they're all things that do make me look a little bit suspect.
He can't stop thinking about the last message to him from Lindsay.
Last thing that she ever said to me was, "I love you." That was the last thing I ever got from her.
Police obtained security video from Bondi Junction railway station, which shows Lindsay getting off the train. Meantime, Simon Ashton identifies Will Matheson as the person he saw arguing with Lindsay outside Disney earlier on the day she disappeared.
I think it was photo number 9 would always come up. I think it came up twice. Said, yeah, photo 9, I think it was. Yeah, I recognised him.
Several weeks go by with no trace of what's happened to Lindsay, and Brandon Leonard returns home to the United States. Then, there's a bizarre twist in the case. In the early hours of December the 7th, Will Matheson is stopped at Coogee by police investigating reports of a prowler. Matheson is carrying a black backpack.
Contained within that backpack was a further backpack, some plastic bags, a pick-handled axe, a Stanley knife, candle holders, candle, hospital-grade disinfectant, 3 pairs of latex gloves, a whole lot of newspapers, and, according to Matheson, holy water.
Matheson tells police he's planning to have a picnic in a local park. Police let him go, but this very strange incident convinces detectives to initiate a covert surveillance operation. Despite extensive inquiries, police are no closer to solving the mystery of Lyndsay Van Blanken's sudden disappearance. That's until January the 10th, 2004, some 7 weeks after Lindsay vanishes. Residents of this apartment block in Queen's Park Road have been complaining about a very bad smell coming from a storeroom on the ground floor. A maintenance man is called to investigate, and what he discovers is so shocking it almost defies description. On January the 10th, 2004, the worst fears of investigators are realised. Residents at this block of units in Queen's Park Road are becoming increasingly concerned about a horrible smell coming from a ground floor storeroom.
Every time my wife used to complain and she's saying there is something really bad smell, and I say, yeah, I can smell it, but it's probably possum or some animal around the park, you know, coming here.
A maintenance man is called to investigate the problem. When uniformed officers arrive here at the apartment block in Queen's Park Road, they're taken to the storeroom. The smell coming from the room has the distinct odour of rotting flesh. The officers are horrified by what they find, and they immediately call for backup. The area is cordoned off, and a crime scene is established. Detective Tony Williams is called to the scene. The detective is stunned by the ghastly discovery.
And upon closer inspection of that bag, I could see what appeared to be a human hand. It was horrific, and it's something that I'll never forget for the rest of my life.
The body stuffed inside the bag is in a decomposing state. It's clear to police that the victim has been brutally murdered.
It wasn't known at that time the exact cause of death, basically due to the position of the body, but it was quite obvious, given the location of the body in the bag, that the person had suffered quite a horrific and horrendous death.
It's the body of a female. Detective Joe Dewey arrives at the scene.
It was quite horrific, bearing in mind it was summer at the time, and the bag had been contained within that room for 6 to 7 weeks.
Detectives can make out what appear to be cable ties wound tightly around the victim's neck.
It doesn't take much to assume that her death would have been extremely violent, bearing in mind that a cable tie had been placed around her neck, and she obviously would have fought for her life, knowing that she was soon to die and with not being able to breathe at all. So it was quite horrendous to think that the death she would have suffered.
specialised forensic officers arrive and begin a meticulous operation to catalogue the physical evidence at the crime scene. The body is also examined by a forensic pathologist.
The female was dressed in a black leather jacket with distinctive epaulettes. This was a jacket that we were told by Lindsay's family Lindsay was wearing on the 24th of November. It was through this jacket that we identified the body in the bag as being Lyndsay Van Blanken at that stage.
Lindsay's grandmother hears a news report about the discovery and calls Louise.
I told her not to worry because the police would have let us know before the media, and if there was any possibility that it may have been Lindsay, that we would have been informed. However, on thinking about that, I contacted the police, and when they said that there is a possibility that it could be her, obviously my world pretty much fell apart at that point.
Delivering a death message is a difficult task at any time. However, faced with this particular circumstance, having to inform a mother that her daughter had been murdered, placed in a cricket bag and left in the storeroom underneath a block of units, no more than 500 metres from her own family home, made it only the more difficult, emotional and traumatic.
The items police recover from the body found at Queen's Park Road are identified by Lindsay's mother as belonging to her daughter. Lindsay's mobile phone, black backpack and her combat-style boots are missing. Lindsay's body is positively identified through dental records. Police aren't sure how Lindsay came to be inside the storeroom, but they're certain that Will Matheson is the killer. Police can only imagine what went on inside the darkened room, but it's clear she struggled violently with her attacker.
Come on, do you want your diary?
All indications are that Lindsay was somehow lured to the storeroom by her killer.
It's in that box there. Do you want it?
The room is filled with discarded furniture and rubbish.
Here.
Yes.
Shortly after entering the room, Lindsay is brutally attacked. It's a desperate struggle as she fights for her life. And no one can hear her hysterical screams for help. She's thrown to the ground. Cable ties are being pulled tightly around her neck. She digs into her attacker, clawing with her fingernails, almost ripping them out in a last desperate attempt to get free. She fights for breath. She is weakening, and soon she can fight no more. Her flailing arms fall still beside her body. Then nothing, just blackness. Lindsay's body is then cruelly and callously stuffed into a large sports bag. The bag is sealed. The killer then drags the bag over to a corner of the room where it's hidden under discarded boxes and rubbish before hastily leaving the scene. In the United States, Lindsay's fiancé, Brandon Leonard, is still waiting for news and is beside himself with worry. When the call finally comes and he's told about the discovery, he is devastated.
My initial reaction, of course, as any person was it's not her. It can't be her. She's not her. No. They informed me that that Mom had that Mom had positively ID'd her engagement ring, and that it was the person they found was wearing Lindsay's clothes. And obviously I couldn't handle it. I just fell over.
Police intensify their inquiries. Will Matheson's every move is recorded by the undercover surveillance team. 48 hours after the discovery of Lindsay's body, Will is admitted to the psychiatric unit of Prince of Wales Hospital, suffering from extreme distress. On January the 29th, a funeral service is held for Lyndsay Van Blanken. 300 mourners pack the Waverley Church. Lindsay's white casket, topped with her smiling portrait, flowers and 5 of her cartoon drawings, is carried to a horse-drawn carriage waiting outside. Meantime, detectives focus their attention on trying to trace the origin of the distinctive sports bag which contained Lindsay's body.
It was potentially identifying the purchase or the sale of that cricket bag could well identify to investigators who the killer was.
Will Matheson's father tells detectives that he'd been shopping here in Bondi Junction with his son just 2 days before Lindsay disappeared. He tells police that when Will returned to the car, he was carrying a large sports bag. That is a stunning revelation. Could this be the breakthrough that police are looking for? Police decide to raid Matheson's home in Coogee. In Will Matheson's room, they find dozens of newspaper reports relating to Lyndsay Van Blanken. They also locate a diary written by Lindsay. In a drawer of his dressing table, they discover dictaphone tape recordings made by Will, reminiscing about Lindsay. The recordings all refer to Lindsay in the past tense. Matheson has also recorded a song. Its lyrics are chilling.
The first 2 lines of the song being, just the other day,
watched you pass away. You said I love you.
but please let me stay. This was what we believe was the first direct evidence and a somewhat partial admission made by Matheson pertaining to the murder.
Detectives visit Prince of Wales Hospital, hoping to conduct a further interview with Will Matheson, but they're told he's in a disturbed state, suffering from schizophrenia, is suicidal, and is not fit to be questioned. Then there is a major break in the case. Police know that if they can locate the origin of the sports bag containing Lindsay's body, they'll have their first solid lead. Exhaustive inquiries are made. Police canvass every sporting goods store in the eastern suburbs, and finally, their persistence pays off.
We established that one bag and one bag only, identical to that the body of Lindsay was found in, was supplied to Rebel Sports at Bondi Junction. Inquiries with Rebel have told us that that particular bag was sold on the 22nd of November 2003 for a $120 cash sale at 1:30 p.m.
Police also know that Will Matheson was in possession of a large sports bag on the same day the bag containing Lindsay's body was purchased.
We as investigators consider this as a significant breakthrough to the investigation, as we could place Will Matheson 100 metres away from where the bag was purchased at that particular time.
When detectives visit the store where the bag's been purchased, they notice a security camera outside this hotel. Police hope that the external camera may provide an image of the person who bought the item. The footage shows Will Matheson. He's right there, walking past, just minutes before the bag is purchased.
It is a major breakthrough because if you go through the time sequence, you have William Matheson purchasing a pair of diving boots from Cash Converters at 1:22 p.m. You have him walking past the hotel, captured on CCTV several minutes later, and then you have the sale at Rebel Bondi Junction at 1:30 p.m. So in the span of 8 minutes, we can track the movements, and we believe that the sale of the bag was by Will Matheson.
Police are still unable to interview Will Matheson, and they're forced to wait until the 22nd of March when he's released from hospital. Police ask Will about a large sports bag, which he had in his possession just 2 days before Lindsay disappeared.
If that's the case, how come you're not carrying it?
Well, I was carrying it.
I'll show you that photo again. Can you see yourself carrying a big blue or black bag?
No, I can't. But I don't know when that was taken. I didn't say I found the bag after my purchase.
Yes, you did.
Or before my purchase, I can't remember.
Now this totally contradicts the CCTV that we had, because if that was the case, Will would have been captured carrying that bag on the CCTV. That to us then confirmed that he'd actually purchased the bag from Rebel, as Rebel is situated further up the road from the hotel.
12:35 p.m.
2004.
Yes.
2 days later, police take Matheson on a walk around, retracing his movements. He shows them where he says he found the sports bag and the point where he says he last saw Lindsay 2 days later, on the day she disappeared. Police also take him to the apartment building in Queen's Park Road.
When was the last time you were here with Lindsay?
This was a while ago.
Can you estimate a time or a date?
No, it was many months before we broke up.
Okay. Did you ever come to this location after you broke up with Lindsay?
No.
No? Have you ever been in this room?
No.
No?
No.
Have you ever been in this room here to the left?
No.
No?
No.
But you agree you have been in this car park space?
Yes.
Okay. Do you want to have a look in there? Have you been in there before?
No.
Definitely not?
No.
Okay. That's the room where Lindsay's body was discovered. We've only got a couple more questions, but you take your time, have a break.
Can we go somewhere else?
I'm sorry,
can we just go somewhere else?
Okay, all right.
On the 31st of March, Matheson, at his own request, is re-interviewed by detectives. He tells them about hearing voices inside his head, voices ordering him to kill people and also to harm himself. However, he says the voices have never told him to harm Lindsay. On the 19th of May 2004, Will Matheson is arrested and charged with murdering Lyndsay Van Blanken.
Here? Yes, under the mattress.
Police investigating the horrific murder of Sydney teenager Lyndsay Van Blanken have arrested and charged her former boyfriend, Will Matheson. Detectives have found evidence that directly links Matheson to the sports bag containing Lindsay's body. News of Will Matheson's arrest quickly spreads.
The night Lyndsay Van Blanken was strangled to death, her former boyfriend claimed he'd walked her home from work, said goodbye, and then went on to play cello in a school concert.
Will Matheson maintains his innocence, but his story just doesn't add up. The evidence against him is strong, but police know that they must have a watertight case if the charges are to be proved in court. Detectives delve deeper into Will Matheson's past. They also obtain further damning evidence from a conversation between Will Matheson and his father following a news report about Lindsay's murder.
He recorded the news. He played that video back to his father and said to his father words similar to, "Dad, I think I did it, I've lost my sports bag."
Then there is another breakthrough in the investigation. Matheson is also unaware that police have a diary he'd given to a friend for safekeeping when he was in hospital.
We obtained evidence from Lindsay's family that that diary was a diary that she treasured and would never allow Will Matheson to have possession of it.
When he appears in Waverley Court, a magistrate finds there's sufficient evidence capable of convincing a jury that Will Matheson murdered Lyndsay Van Blanken.
I've no doubt in my mind that he meticulously planned this murder, and he thought of what he believed was every basis to cover his tracks.
On November the 2nd, 2005, almost 2 years after Lyndsay Van Blanken's murder, Will Matheson appears before the New South Wales Supreme Court on trial for murder. Police reassure Lindsay's mother that they've done everything possible to ensure Matheson will be found guilty.
They were very attentive. I mean, they did keep us up to speed, but I suppose it's difficult. They can't say, well, we've got this bloke in the frame, and I mean, I guess we all knew that that's where they were concentrating their efforts, but we didn't know the nitty-gritty.
Justice Jane Matthews presides over the trial here at the New South Wales Supreme Court. The evidence is considered by a jury of 12 men and women. Will Matheson is represented by barrister Leonie Flannery, and the police case is presented by Crown Prosecutor Margaret Cunneen. When he's led into the court, Matheson appears dazed and confused.
Yes, I remember when he was brought into the court, and I thought that the wrong man had been brought in and placed into the dock because his appearance had changed so much between the interviews he had had with the police at about the time of Lindsay's death and the trial.
His gaze would come up past you, and it was like you weren't there. It's like there was somebody behind you and he was looking at them, like through you, which I found chilling.
The Crown case against Will Matheson is dependent upon circumstantial evidence. The prosecution has amassed a huge amount of material.
It was voluminous. There were many pieces of circumstantial evidence in this case, but together they painted a strong Crown case.
Shortly after the trial begins, there's a major setback. The judge directs that some of the evidence should be withheld from the jury, but it's shown to them accidentally, and Justice Matthews is forced to order a new trial.
And that's always a devastating blow to everyone because a lot of witnesses have to be called again and everything has to start again with a new jury.
When Will Matheson's trial begins again, the court is shown video taken of Lindsay at Bondi Junction railway station on the day she was murdered. The newly empanelled jury is told the horrific details of how police believe Lindsay met her death.
It was a particularly cruel murder, and it was planned. Lindsay's murderer had prepared two cable ties by tying them together in advance and forming a loop. So two were joined together and looped at the end, so that what was left was a loop which was in effect a one-way ratchet. So that was ready to be put over her head when she was lured to the rather distasteful place where she met her death.
The court hears evidence that the cable ties used to strangle Lindsay were pulled so tightly around the teenager's neck they couldn't be undone.
When Lindsay's body was found, the cable ties around her neck measured less than 26 centimetres.
The Crown attempts to establish that Will Matheson has lied to police about his involvement in the murder. The court hears evidence that the scratch marks on Will's body could not have been made by a cat or a rat, as he has claimed. The jury is also shown video of Matheson at Bondi Junction, minutes before the sports bag was purchased. The jury is shown Lindsay's art diary, which Will Matheson had in his possession, and the bizarre song Will Matheson has recorded is played to the court. Brandon Leonard, Lindsay's American fiancé, has been flown back to Australia and gives evidence on behalf of the Crown. He tells the jury that Lindsay was frightened by Matheson, who'd begun stalking her.
One day, she went on the Saturday before she disappeared. She went out to the shops to pick up some lunch for us. And while she was gone, she received a text message from him that said, "I see you." That was the first time that Lindsay had, she didn't really open up, she just got very upset and I knew something was very wrong.
The trial lasts 3 weeks. The evidence against Matheson is circumstantial. Police, the prosecution, and Lindsay's family are all on edge. The jury retires to consider its verdict. It could go either way. Then on December the 9th, 2005, the jury returns. Will Matheson is found guilty. Outside the court, the verdict is met with sadness and relief by Lindsay's grieving family.
Your opinion on what you think of the sentence?
I was just really happy with the judge's summary, and hopefully for us it's closure.
Following a 2-year police investigation and a trial lasting 3 weeks, 23-year-old William Matheson has been found guilty of murdering his former girlfriend, Lyndsay Van Blanken.
I remember when the verdict was delivered. I remember the emotional reaction from Lindsay's family, and that was very moving. I thought that they had been delivered justice, and in that sense my job was done.
Justice Jane Matthews describes Lyndsay Van Blanken's murder as brutal and cruel in the extreme. The judge tells the court it's difficult to imagine the horror that Lindsay must have suffered, a horror that haunts her family to this day. For the murder of Lyndsay Van Blanken, William Harold Matheson is sentenced to 27 years in jail.
So, Cynthia, a great result today.
Outside the court, Lindsay's natural father, Ron Van Blanken, reacts to the news.
Enough. She was a lovable person, and obviously we miss her, and we'll miss her for the rest of our lives.
For detectives Joe Dewey and Tony Williams, the sentence is testament to the hard work carried out by all those who took part in the investigation.
It was a very emotional moment for Lindsay's family. It was something that probably gave them some closure to what's happened. It was certainly a reflection of all the hard work and dedication put in by all the investigators on this strike force.
To this day, detectives are still unsure how Will Matheson managed to lure Lindsay to the storeroom at Queen's Park. Lyndsay Van Blanken was a beautiful and talented young woman whose life was tragically cut short just as she was on the verge of realising her dreams. Ironically, it was her pursuit of those dreams that would see her life venture down a path from which there will be no return.
You can't put into words what she went through, and not only that, now it's not only affected her family but all her friends, and it's just a tragedy. It's absolute tragedy.
Was in the prime of her life, just taken away by a selfish predator who had the attitude that, well, if he couldn't have her, well, no one else could. Quite a tragic set of circumstances.
I mean, he ruined Lindsay's mum's life and her whole family and her dad and her sister and my life as well. It's affected everybody, not just him and not just her.
The hard part for the family was that she was missing for so many weeks, and she was missing through Christmas. So there was a huge part of us that all knew, we knew that she was gone, but there was a part of us that was hoping that for some wild reason she was somewhere else.
You know when you meet that special person, and I don't care who it is, I don't care if it's your best friend or your partner or just your drinking buddy, you know that that person is special to you. I found my best friend. I found my soulmate. I found the greatest love of my life in Lindsay.
To me, it just seemed very surreal. I just didn't believe it. And I remember I just felt like I had a big block of concrete inside me. I just didn't believe it. I still can't sometimes, because Lindsay was so quiet, and I sometimes think she's still here.